Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? 2 hours of USA Prepares. If you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is up. 605-477-3249. Jason is engineering the broadcast at GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. With us live in Australia, Guineith Isaacs. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you today?
Quite well. I'm looking forward to racing out to the supermarket where I can buy the newest Kellogg's cereal. It's called All Together. And here it is, headlines, and the website is pinknews.co.uk. Quote, this is the headline, quote, Kellogg's is launching an LGBT-themed cereal so you can start your day with maximum gay, end quote. No kidding. So, subheadline, if you're a fan of breakfast and being gay, we've got great news for you. Kellogg's is launching the LGBT-themed cereal. That's the subheadline, end quote. And it's called All Together. And it's... Can you imagine? We are racing down the drain. And so now we have a queer cereal. And you can give it to your young ones. Get them started on their transgender path, their homo path, their lesbian path, their faggot path, all that. You can do that, and you can start the breakfast with your child, because who else would eat this stuff? And let's see, what colors? It looks like it's got all the colors, all those dyes. So my question is, if they're willing to put this on the outside of the box, what are they willing to put on the inside of the box? I kid you not.
I would be looking at the phytoestrogen levels in that breakfast cereal.
Yeah.
I think that it probably contains rather a lot of soy. That is, specifically designed to mess with, especially male endocrine systems, hormonal systems. I was getting a pair of reading glasses a couple days ago, and I was at one of these great big box stores. Because I'm very particular about what kind of frames I want on my reading glasses. They have these deluxe type glasses that have these really wide vision blocking pieces on the side. I don't even know what you call them. They go over your ear, but they're really thick and wide, so you can't see peripherally, left and right. It blocks your vision. So I don't want that. I want, thin but strong with a hinge right by the lenses so that they'll last a long time, won't break as easily. So I'm really particular at what kind of frames I wanted. And so I'm looking. Finally, I found one. And so I was pretty happy. But while I was there looking, I think he was a guy. But his chest had pointed breasts. I couldn't believe it. Now, this wasn't a little guy. This was a guy, let's say 6'1", maybe 6'2", probably 250 pounds. from the back he looked masculine. From the front he looked feminine. I couldn't believe it. He had pointy boobs, but he wasn't trying to be. He wasn't trying to be queer. I mean, he was just a guy with boobs. And I'm thinking, I guess you like chicken, and I guess you like estrogenic compounds, and I guess you wash your dishes without gloves, and you get the estrogen in your body, and it's working just great. And maybe he's eating at fast food joints where they lace the cattle and the chickens with estrogenic compounds and chemicals to make the breast meat puff out, and he's getting all the benefits of that. And that's why I couldn't believe it. I said to Mrs. Finelli, "Look at that! Would you look at that? Gosh, if if I were in a position like that, I'd be looking for a minimizing bra to just not look feminine." I mean, literally, this guy was probably seriously. I mean, when I built a computer system for a bank, and it was a customer service pending system, and I called it B Cups, BCUPS, just for my own amusement, and then we had C Cups, and this guy was probably E Cups or double D Cups. I mean, this guy was huge.
My God!
And you'd think that he would notice, and he had one of those stretchy kind of knit shirts on that fully showed off all of his voluptuousness. Unbelievable. But that's where we are. And, now I look at, people like you and Mrs. Finelli and our family, we're all lean, and I guess that's because we don't live in the city and we don't need to be entertained. Our son said something really interesting to me. He said, we were talking about movies, and I'm thinking, I haven't been to a movie in a long, long, long time. And I don't want to go to the movies. I just don't want to do it. And he said, you know why people go to the movies, Dad, right? You know, right? I said, why? And he says, because they've got nothing better to do. And that statement stuck with me. And I keep thinking about that. People in cities, they mill around and they're looking for something to do. Me, I'm looking for a break. I'm looking for just like 3 minutes in between doing things to not do something because it's nonstop here. I mean, it's never ending. I've got more things to do than I can do. So I'd really, if I find 3 minutes together, I'm going to take a nap. But I can't find them. That's what life on the farm is like. But living in the city, nah, you got nothing to do. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. That's what life in the city is like. Can you imagine that, Guineith? It's not like your life.
Oh my gosh, I've got so many things to do. It's really quite amazing around here. Just today, okay, I actually applied for a job today, and I was accepted for this job today. I got the job, and it's more work, but it's work that actually pays. By contrast to work that I do around here that doesn't pay. So that's nice. And, the sort of work that I will be doing, Vincent, is manual farm labour. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what?
Manual farm labour.
Manual farm labour. It's similar to work I was doing around here anyway, except they get paid for it. And these people who hired me to do the manual farm labour for them, it's a more or less permanent position, and they're so grateful because they were desperate for somebody to go and do some manual farm labour for them. How's that? And it's amazing, isn't it? Nobody wants to do that.
I can understand that.
I
can understand that because
manual farm labour.
Yeah, you're talking about shovel, rake, pickmatic, pickaxe, lifting, lugging, carrying. Getting dirty.
Feeding animals, cleaning up their poops, basically.
Uh-huh.
That's going to be my job.
So you can put on the resume that you
and clean up the poop out the other end.
Yeah. So input output management.
To do it. What was that?
So you can put on a resume that you are in charge of input output management, caloric direction, and supervisor of corporate hygiene.
Yes.
Yep. And tonnage management.
Yeah, and it's
well,
like
good for you.
This. Nobody wants to do that work. And they said they were so grateful. They put an ad up, and they were so grateful because I applied for the job. And I had experience. I had experience before working with this sort of farm animal. And yeah, it's they're just grateful to have somebody who knows what they're doing and can put food in one end and clean up the poop out of the other end, and is not afraid to do that because people don't want to do that sort of work anymore.
I can imagine. There's some horse farms outside of Springfield, Missouri, and these are really nice looking horse farms, and they're manicured, and so somebody's got to do that. But I imagine that when people board their horses at these large farms, they come out, once every few weeks, and they ride their horse, and they think that it's really great, and then they leave, and all of the maintenance is left to someone else.
Yeah,
but they don't realize that
somebody has to put the food in one end and go in and muck out the stall at the other end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. And you have to put the right food in because I was told by a guy who did this that he was making the rations for a famous person's Arabian horses, and he was using a skid steer, to mix it, a couple buckets of this, a couple buckets of that, and he got it kind of mixed up, and the horses died. And he was blamed for it, and he should have been because he obviously wasn't paying attention or didn't know what he was doing. So, yeah, that can happen. So it sounds great that they've got the right person for this job. Now, how does that relate to being on the radio? Does your schedule change? Can you still be on the radio? What happens?
I can still be on the radio. I explained all that to them, and they said, yeah, that's fine. That morning, you just start a bit later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great.
That's fine. Because I don't know if you've ever had anything to do with the racing industry, but it's an early start.
Well, I have had something to do with the racing industry, but in order to be involved in the race, you had to have gasoline. So maybe it's a different industry.
Yeah, it's horse racing. You start early.
Yeah. All right, we'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs, congratulations. So at her new job, which she'll be starting soon, Guineith can be introduced as our degreed environmental scientist and input-output manager and caloric nutrient manager. Is that right, Guineith?
Yeah. I guess so. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad for you.
I'll tell you something else. When, I had applied for unemployment benefits here in Australia. I'd been granted unemployment benefits here in Australia, but I didn't like to be on unemployment benefits, and there's a number of reasons for that. One of them is I like to look after my own finances, and I like to be self-employed, and with the government here in Australia, They don't encourage people who are on unemployment benefits to generate their own income. Okay? But if you are self-employed and they are happy to hire me on a self-employed basis as what's called in this country a sub-contractor. I don't know how employment law goes in America, but I've already had in the past the paperwork for being a subcontractor. I've subcontracted in the past for various work that I've done, and I prefer to work as a subcontractor rather than an employee. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Well, absolutely it does. And that's something I teach about how to avoid legally paying taxes by being an entrepreneur and having your own business. So literally what you are is you are running your own business, and they are paying you to do things as a subcontractor. And then you have expenses that you can deduct from the check that you receive. I won't say wages, but we'll say your check. And for example, at your farm, you're going to have to manage this business, so you can apportion. If it were the United States, I don't know the tax code in Australia, but in the United States, you could apportion a section of your home. So let's say you had 5 rooms, and one of them is the office to manage the business. So you could deduct 1/5 of that amount you receive for the work you do as a subcontractor, 1/5 of the household expenses, like the electricity, if you had an electric bill, the insurance bill, if you had one of those, the maintenance for the roof, and whatever the expenses are to run that household, because that's where your office would be, you could deduct that portion. Now, if you had a one-room cabin, you could apportion part of that, some percentage of the square footage of that cabin as your office area. And all of that would be absolutely perfectly above board as a deduction in the United States for running your business. As compared to an employee, you cannot take any of those deductions. So in my opinion, if you look at what people do and those who are successful financially, you'll find out that they run their own businesses. And that's what you're doing. That's what I do. I have a business here, which happens to be a farm.
Yeah. So the result of that is that in the next few days, I will be contacting the Australian equivalent of Social Security and telling them they can take their unemployment check back. But I don't need it, and this is the reason why. And they'll probably say, good on you, because really they don't want to give people unemployment checks. But the reason why they do that is because otherwise people are going to be starving on the street.
Yeah, and when they're starving... and when they're starving on the street, they're going to do the next few things, which is break windows, loot, riot. Yeah, because they're hungry. There's nothing new about that. That's been going on for a long time.
That's right. And then politicians get voted out when that sort of thing happens.
Yeah, well, it should be voted out anyway.
I'll tell you what. Because the business that I'm in is horse management, okay, it's a tax deduction for me to, I intend to, in the future, do horse management on my own property, okay? So it's a tax deduction for me to turn around and say, right, fencing materials, trough, irrigation systems, etc., etc. Build an arena, build a round yard, and so on.
Hold that thought. Guineith Isaacs is with us. She is a degreed scientist, and she is talking about her new job with raising horses and caring for horses at a horse farm. And I think it's fascinating, Guineith, that you have figured out how to extend this position, or not position, this consulting arrangement, this non-employee arrangement where you're paid as a contractor or a subcontractor, into something you can leverage this into your business where you can expand and do similar or the same thing. And as you do that, your fencing, your water troughs, your water storage system, plumbing, running lines from your solar system, expanding your solar system for the purpose of expanding your business on your farm. All of that makes sense when completing your taxes, should you choose to do so. And it's all, in the United States, all that's above board.
Yeah, in Australia,
but I have to tell you,
there's basically exactly the same.
Well, I can tell you that you're one of the very few. You're one of the few who has considered doing this. By the way, Guineith, I'm looking at the call or the screen about this call, and I'm at 2001 milliseconds, which means that from me to GCN is just a hair over 2 seconds delay, probably something similar for you to GCN. So we're looking at an extreme delay. So I just want to tell you that when we keep stepping on each other, it's not because we're being rude. It's because the delay is so long. So I just want to tell you that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. But I'll tell you what, horses are a hole that you pour money down. You're always spending money on them. Horses and yachts. I've owned horses and I've owned yachts, and they are holes that you pour money down. And if you own horses or if you own yachts, and if you love to work with horses or yachts, you better figure out a way that you can make money off of them, or you better have some other passive income that you can use to fund your hobby. Because I know that the horse thing is really, really addictive. It's a very positive addiction. But once you've had to do with horses, you don't want to be without horses. They're amazing creatures to work with. And, it's endless, the amount that you can learn about horses. But they're expensive. They're expensive to buy and they're expensive to own. You could easily spend, with just having a horse standing in the paddock, you can easily spend $100 a week on that horse, even if it's on your own land. That's a lot of money. And it's, like I say, the advantage, I want to go into a little bit more the advantage of this way of doing things. And we want to emphasize this is completely legal. And the people who run the system set the system up this way for themselves so that they could do this, so that they could minimize the amount of taxes that they would have to pay. Okay? And they generally pay very little tax, the people who run the system, the politicians, the bankers, the lawyers, the consultants, and so on and so forth. They all do this, and many of them do it with racehorses, because racehorses are an even more expensive variety of horse to keep than just a regular horse, because they need better food, and they need better farriers, and the better food costs more, the better farriers cost more, and the better stabling, the better conditions, etc., etc., etc. It is all more expensive. And, yeah, this is it. But if you want to set up a horse property, you have to have stables, you have to have arenas, you have to have round yards to be able to work the horses, you have to have small paddocks, you have to have large paddocks, you have to have troughs, you have to have irrigation systems and pumps and all the rest of it. And, these horse properties, some of them, their owners have spent hundreds, or it's actually completely normal for their owners to have spent hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on setting up these horse properties. And generally, the money that they have spent has been money that has been a tax write-off. Exactly what we're talking about. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Well, absolutely it makes sense, because when I buy fencing, it's not for me. I don't need any fencing. I don't need a bulldozer. I don't need a dirt bike. I don't need a Jeep to ride around, an old Jeep to ride around to check the cows. The business needs that. Whether I'm here or not, the business still needs fencing. It still needs a utility vehicle. It still needs oil filters, fuel, maintenance, and things like that. Somebody's got to go check the cows, and sometimes a dirt bike is the best way to do that. Now, I'm not talking about being extravagant, class. I'm not talking about that at all. When we buy tools and equipment for the farm, it's at the best value. I would never consider buying a new dirt bike. I would never consider buying a new Jeep. I would never consider buying a new bulldozer or a backhoe or a tractor. It makes no sense. But when I can buy a tractor for $5,000 and it's 100 horsepower and it still has life in it, that makes sense to me. And that's a deduction against income. So I can keep buying tools for the farm, and I can, if I decide that that's what I want to do and I never make a profit, it's because of my own mistakes. I bought tools instead of making money for me. I haven't made any money at all farming. I've only been doing it, since the 80s. I don't know how to do it. I know that farms need equipment. I know they need fencing and fence tools. And I know that it takes me a lot of time and our family a lot of time to do all this. I just don't know how to make money at it. Well, and that's what the rich do. If you look at, and this is my opinion, so if you're one of the Kennedys and you disagree with me, this is my opinion. I believe that when families such as the Kennedys have that annual Easter egg hunt on their property, and their very exclusive property, and they invite all these handicapped, retarded children to come look for Easter eggs on their property. Well, they've got to fertilize the lawn, they've got to cut the lawn, they have to maintain the lawn all year long, so they can have all these children come show up. They've got to paint all the buildings, they've got to repair all the rot, the damage, and the roof and all that, and the driveway and the signage, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. And they've got to do all that for the children. Those are all tax deductions. And isn't it interesting that they probably want to do that anyway for their property, right? They'd want to keep it up. But if they have some charity event, it's tax deductible. So for one day a year, they have this event, the children come out, and all of the maintenance, all of the upkeep, all of the repairs, all of those things that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, well, it's for the children. Okay? And you can do the same thing too. You don't have to have an Easter egg hunt, but if you start your own business, you can take the same tax deductions that, and I'm going to call them the rich take, because Guineith said it right, that those in power, those who run the show, those who make the rules, figured out that they needed to avoid paying the taxes that they demand everyone else pays. So the easiest way to do that is to write the rules to favor them. Tax rules, tax ordinances, tax laws favor the landholder and the business owner. It does not favor the tenant, and it does not favor the employee. Tenants and employees are at an extreme disadvantage. Business owners and property owners are at extreme advantages. And if you want proof, all you have to do is ask yourself, of all the people I know, who are better off, those who own businesses or those who are employees? All you have to do is pick one and figure it out. The other thing you can do is say, who's better off, tenants or land or property owners? Who's better off? It's as simple as that. It's right in front of you. And you're looking and thinking about people I don't even know, because I don't even know a lot of you, who are in this class. I know the instructors, but I don't know a lot of the students. So You know the people in your circle of influence and circle of friends. Who's better off? And I know the answer. It's the business owner and it's the property owner. No question about it. Guineith, is it the same in Australia?
Absolutely. Yep, because the thing is that I've actually worked in a corporate environment. I used to be a corporate personal assistant to a company director. And so I got to see how, it wasn't an enormous department store. It was a country town department store, but it was a department store. And, I got to see how people who have department stores live, and about how people who are corporate directors live. And it's a world apart. It's a whole different mindset, because it wasn't just her, it was also the other directors of the company, and how they lived, the things that they were able to do in their lives, because they, had a different way of thinking about work. And for anyone out there in the class, it may be worth your while going to your employer, if you're an employee, and sitting down with them and asking them if they would be prepared to change your terms of employment from being a employee to being a subcontractor, because they benefit as well, okay? They benefit because they don't have to provide health insurance, accident insurance. They don't have to provide, in this country we call it superannuation cover, which is, they put aside a certain amount of your wages for when you retire. And it's supposed to go into, an account that is invested in various things. I think the closest thing in America you would have is 401ks and IRAs. And here in Australia, yeah.
Yeah, hold that thought. We're going into a break. Guineith, as a subcontractor, I'm going to read off. I just jotted some of these things down during the broadcast. These are just off the top of my head. So as a subcontractor, I believe that you can take all of these items as a deduction. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And tell me if you disagree with any of these and maybe why. So I believe you can, as a subcontractor, you can deduct these items that you would be buying. Shoes, boots, blue jeans, belts, shirts, travel expenses, meals, haircuts, a thermos, for coffee, jackets, hats, gloves, socks, knives, if allowed in your particular area, a rifle, a pistol, a shotgun, ammunition, targets, hearing protection, use of your car, motorcycle, if you decide that your mode of transportation is a motorcycle or a dual-purpose off-road, on-road motorcycle, or a dirt bike, protective gear, use of your home office space, etc. Do you disagree with any of those things?
No, they're all deductible. Mm-hmm. They're all
and
related to the work.
Right.
Yep, all of them. And in addition to that, I would say farm fencing, gates, electric fences, security systems, electric gate openers, round yards, arenas, stables, tack. This is specifically with horse farming. Tack, harnesses, if you wanted to get into, working with harness horses, carriages and jigs and, assorted other horse-drawn vehicles. It's all a deduction. Okay?
Trucks,
because
bulldozers.
It all has to do with your business of training horses.
Trucks, bulldozers, backhoes,
especially
implements.
bulldozers, because horse manure is really, really heavy, and you're going to need that bobcat for moving those piles of poop, especially, and also if you've got, in conjunction with your horse business, which a lot of farmers do, vegetable gardens and fruit trees. And you're going to need a bobcat to move that quantity of manure from the manure pile to the garden. And the business that I'm contracted to work for, it will be my daily responsibility to look after 50 horses every single day. And that means 50 wheelbarrow loads of manure. Because one wheelbarrow load of manure is about what a horse poops out each day. And I know that, and I'm fine with that, But like I say, you have to realize that this is work. If you're going to, and, I was talking with somebody today who had been a cattle farmer, and I mentioned about the show, and I mentioned about your cattle farm, and he said, yeah, I've worked with cattle. And he said, he said that they're really interesting creatures. And I said, I don't know anything about cattle. I've never worked with cattle. But I've worked around horses since I was about 15. But it's always been on a recreational basis. But I know how to muck out a stable, and I know how to feed a horse, and I know how to keep it looking good, and I know about their little fobiles, and I know how to act around them and behave safely, which is a big thing. And the thing is, with cattle, it's the same. You have to know about cattle, know how to behave around them safely, because both cows and horses are really, really big beasts. And if you do stupid stuff around them, they have a tremendous capacity to hurt you. And so, yes, you've got to look after your own insurance, health insurance, life insurance, and all the rest of it. And you better make sure you've got that in order, because, disability insurance, because accidents can happen. And if you're going to work as a subcontractor, it's not like, yay, I get all this money, and I can, you can't do that. You've got to realize that you've got to look after your own superannuation. You've got to look after your own disability cover, your own health cover, your own life insurance, and all of these things. You've got to manage them yourself, and a proportion of your income has to go towards that. But that's also a tax write-off as well. Because
That's right.
these are all
That's
things
right.
that your employer would be providing.
That's exactly right. And what does it take to start a business? Well, class, it takes saying, I'm in business. That's it. Now you're in business. That's all it takes. I have to do something after you say that. We'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs. She's live in Australia. And there are 2 times when horses and cattle are dangerous. All set, cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. I'm delighted to hear what Guineith is talking about. We have not prepared one iota for this broadcast. I had no idea what we were going to be talking about. So everything that you're hearing is just off the top of our heads. We're just saying what we believe based on our experiences. And Guineith, as I'm learning, is one of the very, very, very few people who has decided to implement the tax strategies that I use. So, for example, I've been mentioning that I'm writing a book, and maybe I'll publish the book, maybe I won't. But because I'm talking about it,
because I'm saying that I'm working on it, or even if I didn't, it would be up to me as a business decision for my business to write this book. And I can get all the way to the point where I am ready to click publish and say, nah, I'm not going to do it. And can the IRS say to me, whoa, you've deducted the business use of your home, you've deducted insurance costs, maintenance costs, you've deducted. Yeah, all those things are above board and bona fide, but now you're not going to publish? Yeah. I changed my mind. That's up to me. That's not up to them. They can't say, you can't take these tax deductions because you've changed your mind. That's a business decision. I could change my mind for whatever reason I want. I could say, you know what, I don't think I'm going to sell any of them. I don't think anybody would pay attention. I don't think anybody would want them. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. I don't know, but I don't feel like doing it anymore, so I'm going to do something else instead. So I could do that. Or I could click the button and say publish. So, for example, I've made an enormous amount of mistakes in my business decisions. I mean, I bought a little dirt bike and it was too small. That was a mistake. Should have bought a little bigger one. All of them were used. They're not a lot of money, just a few $100s. Should have bought a bigger one. Well, is the first one not a tax deduction because I made a mistake? No. I'm allowed to make mistakes. Government makes mistakes all the time. I mean, they hold the record for making mistakes. I make mistakes too. So I should have bought a bigger one. Actually, I made a mistake with that. I should have bought a four-wheeler. That was much better. But that was a mistake. Should have bought a Jeep because they have heat and windshield wipers. So, yeah, you can make mistakes. And fencing, all the things that we've been talking about are legitimate tax deductions, legitimate expenses for a farm, which is why I keep saying you need to buy a farm, get out of town, leave the city while you still can. That's not for everybody. You've got to be willing to do the kinds of things that Guineth's talking about, like hauling poop in buckets and wheelbarrows and shoveling. That's what we do. You know, you may see me in a sports coat and a tie and a white long sleeve shirt and combat boots and dark blue jeans, but other times I'm covered with farm substances.
Yeah, that's what a farmer does. Mm-hmm. About half of what a farmer does is feeding animals, and about the other half of what a farmer does is cleaning up the poo. That's just how it is. And it's especially if you've got an intensive farming system, that's doubly necessary. So if you've got your animals in pens or stables, then you need to go through every single day and you need to get rid of the poo out of the pen or out of the stable or whatever. That's just life. That's what farmers do. And, you know, Vincent, I think that's why a lot of people don't want to be farmers, because they don't want to deal with poop. That's
doctors and nurses do. I mean, that's a big part of their day. It's a big problem. How many people hit the button and say, I got to go again and again. I mean, that's what happens. So it's not just farmers. It's all anyone who deals with life has got the poop and the pee problem. And, you know, and there are other things. So for example, I don't want to deal with it as much as I have to. So what we do is we don't have intensive farming. What we do is we rotate the fields that we let our cows graze. We say, here's what you can graze today, and then tomorrow we let them graze another area. So we let them spread the poop out themselves. And then what we do is maybe 30 years ago, I bought a chain harrow. And a chain harrow is like a chain link fence, but way heavier. So instead of just wire bent into the form of a chain link fence, it's about 5/8 of an inch steel, or 1/2 inch. and it's woven into a much larger opening area, and it weighs, maybe 1,000 pounds. And I drag it behind a tractor. And as it drags through the grass, it breaks up that manure and spreads it around. So I just get on a tractor and I pull this chain harrow, and it does all the spreading for me. But I still get covered, poop flies up from the front wheels and the back wheels, and, I still get covered in poop, but it's not quite so bad. It's just a little bit of poop. That's why farmers like brown clothing, brown jackets.
Yeah, gumboots.
Yeah. I mean, that if you look at Carhartt brand jackets, the brown color, the different shades of brown, well, that's dried poop color.
That's just unavoidable.
Yeah.
That's what you have to do. And that's no matter what sort of farming that you do.
Mm-hmm.
And, it really is amazing. But, people, I think that they just don't want to do any physical work of any description. If you want to make a lot of money in this world, everybody thinks that you make a lot of money by becoming a button presser. But, something, the market is so flooded with button pressers that the price for being a button presser has actually gone through the floor. And where the real money is to be made, at least here in Australia, I think it's probably the same in the United States, is tradesmen. If you're a tradesman, you can name your price just about, because nobody wants to be a tradesman, a fitter and turner, a painter and decorator, a rigger, a dogger, a heavy diesel mechanic, an auto mechanic, any of these trades, a plumber, an electrician, anything like that. They don't want to do it because it's too much like hard work. They don't want to go out. And actually, I did write an email to you earlier, and I went into this. My husband, Archie, had a job once when he was alive, and his job, he was a painter and decorator by trade. And he got this job, and his job was to paint the Sydney Harbour Bridge in Australia, okay? And he would get his paint bucket out, and he would have to mix up the paint in the morning, and, and then he would have to go out when it was the right consistency, and he'd have to go and climb up the bridge, and he'd have to get his paintbrush and physically paint the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And he would start at one end of the bridge, and he would paint. And, of course, he wasn't the only one. There was a whole team of them. And but by the time the team got from one end of the bridge to the other end of the bridge, it was time for them to go back to the first part of the bridge because the bridge would need painting again. And they had a whole team of extras to help them. They had riggers whose job it was to, do the safety harnesses for these painters and decorators, because sometimes they would have to go up on wires because they would have to paint the cable, and they would have to paint underneath sections of the bridge, and there was no other way to do it other than to hang from a harness underneath the bridge. And the rigger would have to go and set up the harness for him to paint for the day. So he'd be hanging in a harness and paint. And you'll never guess, I know that I told you who Archie's rigger happened to be, but the class will be absolutely astounded who Archie
He was an Australian.
happened to be. He was an Australian. He was a real dinky-die Aussie. He was Paul Hogan. Crocodile Dundee himself.
Mm-hmm.
This is the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And you can go on the internet and you can type in Paul Hogan, Sydney Harbour Bridge, and there's videos on YouTube where he talks about his days as a rigger on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And it would be his job to set up all the harnesses and all the equipment for the painters and decorators. And if one of them had an accident, it was the rigger's job to get that painter out of there if they had a fall or whatever. And, you know, it's really quite amazing. So if you see in the Crocodile Dundee movie, there's a particular scene where there's a guy going to jump off a building in the Crocodile Dundee movie, and then Crocodile Dundee comes along and just strolls along the outside of the building like it's no big deal whatsoever. The reason why he was able to do that was because he was used to working at heights, and he just used to stroll along the top of the bridge, just like, you know, as you know, as if it was nothing. And, you know, the Sydney Harbour Bridge is a very, very big structure. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet tall. And he would go up there every day and just walk around as if it was just nothing. And that's the reason why, when it came time to do the Crocodile Dundee movies, he was so good at it. His skill as an actor came from his real-life experiences. And if there hadn't been the real-life experiences, that character would not have had the depth that it had. And he did a variety of jobs. You know, he probably did work in the outback for, you know, quite a bit of his career, you know, and saw the people, and he was able to transmit that through his character. So the thing is, if you want to make a lot of money, become a rigger if you're not scared of heights. You know, Archie wasn't scared of heights either. When he was a younger man, he was living in Scotland. He was working at John Brown's shipyard, and he had to be on a scaffold 300 feet up in the air with no safety harnesses and no rigging and no nothing, no safety rails, painting the sides of ocean liners when they came in to be careened in the dry dock. And
All right, we'll be right back. Guineith, you mentioned that you can make a lot of money in the trades. So during the commercial break, I decided to look up what does it cost to install a hot water heater. I was stunned. So according to what I read, typically a person will spend between $769 US and $1,448. That's for the unit and the labor. But if you have a gas unit, that's $50 to $150 more than that. And if you have a tankless version, it's $1,000 to $3,000 more than that.
Wow. That's
for a hot water heater.
Yeah.
Now, I remember hot water heaters, you could buy them for $149, $198. I'm talking about just a regular hot water heater. We're not talking about anything special here. So, and then I looked up the price of painting a house. If you have a fairly large house, it can cost $6,000 to paint a house. Now, we're not talking about building a house. We're talking about, and we're not talking about repairing wood and, you know, removing dry rot and damaged wood. We're just talking about painting. Up to $6,000 to paint a house. So
that's right.
Yeah, the trades. If you go to have your Mercedes worked on, and you say, yeah, it's acting a little weird. Here are the symptoms. They'll say, all right, well, we'll for a couple $100, we'll tell you what the problem is. They'll diagnose it for a couple $100, or they'll try to. Now that does not include the repair labor, nor does it include the repair taxes on the parts. That's just the diagnosis. So now we are looking at an enormous amount of money to fix and maintain things. Enormous. I wanted to share something with you.
That's absolutely true, Vincent, what you're saying.
And here's another component of this. So we learned from an auto parts store the most unbelievable thing. So the Chinese factory outlet has a oil, battery, lubrication, tire department. So you can have your oil changed. You can have tires and batteries installed. And they were on the phone with an auto parts store. And they had a problem because one of their auto mechanic engineers used an impact gun on an oil drain plug on a customer's vehicle and stripped the threads out of the oil pan. Oh, it won't screw in anymore. It won't stay. I've never, ever considered doing that. It's never entered my mind to use. We have a couple impact guns here at the farm. I'm talking about those things that you see the tire changing people. I won't call them mechanics because I don't think they are. Tire changing people, they use them on lug nuts on wheels. They use them to remove them, and they incorrectly use them to reinstall the lug nuts. Well, they use that on the drain plug to tighten it, and stripped out the threads. And while they were on the phone with the auto parts store requesting an oversized drain plug, because when you strip out the threads, one way of recovering from that damage is to put in an oversized drain plug. So it's the threads are the same number of threads per inch, but the diameter of the drain plug is a little bit larger. So when you put the oversized drain plug in, you're cutting new threads in the oil pan. Of course, then you leave little shards of metal in the oil pan unless you really know what you're doing. And while they were on the phone, they said, "Oh, he did it again." So the guy did it twice. So they needed 2 drain plugs. So they damaged 2 customers' vehicles, which leads me to the point: never have Walmart work on your car, no matter what. I have lots of examples, and someday when I've got more time, I can tell you 3 major failures that I am aware of that Walmart caused through their incompetence, through their carelessness, through neglect. These are all my opinions. Come get me, Walmart. We'll be right back. So why did I mention the Chinese factory outlet, Walmart? Because doing the job correctly takes knowledge and skill. And as fewer and fewer people have the knowledge and skill to do the job correctly, the price goes up. And as Guineith was saying, yes, you can earn a living as a tradesman. One other example. Now, this is just the cost to do the job. This does not include the parts. A standard kitchen sink replacement in the United States costs about $468 to replace a kitchen sink. Now, that just means disconnect and remove the existing sink, fit and secure the new sink, and connect it to the existing P-trap and plumbing. It does not include any modifications that might have to be made to the plumbing to connect the new sink. So, for example, if you have older plumbing and it's 1 1/4 inch drain and you want to bring it up to the standard 1 1/2 inch, it's going to cost more. If you have to have fittings to adapt, it will cost more. If you have a dishwasher that you want to connect to your new sink and you didn't have one before, that's more. So, and this does not include the cost of the sink. So now we're looking at, let's say, $400 for the plumbing adapters and the sink. So $400 for the sink and the adapters, plus the $468 for the labor. You're now looking at $868 to replace a kitchen sink. It's nuts. So the point is, you need to have the skills. You need to learn the skills. You need to do these things for yourself, because pretty soon you won't be able to find qualified people to do the job, which is why you should never, in my opinion, never go to Walmart for tires or tire balance or battery change or an oil change. because of the damage that I've seen to people's vehicles. You know, in a Mercedes, there's a vent tube that comes with the Mercedes. So a lot of times the Mercedes vehicles have the car battery under the seat or in the rear passenger compartment under the deck in a station wagon, a Mercedes wagon. So you want the gases, the hydrogen, vented outside the vehicle so you don't have an explosion. So they have a little clear plastic tube. It's about a foot long, about 1/8 inch in diameter, and it's hooked up to a vent on the side of an H8 battery or an H6, which is the international type battery that Mercedes use. And you can get that in any brand. All right? So just you leave that hose with the vehicle, take the battery out, put the new battery in, and reconnect that little hose or tube to vent outside. 100% of the Mercedes vehicles that I've seen with a Walmart battery do not have that hose. They've all been removed. All of them.
Oh, my gosh.
I keep a 10-pack of the connectors to replace them and, 20, 25 feet of hose to replace those that are missing when Mercedes come into our farm. Because they're all missing. Why? Because the engineers at Walmart, in my opinion, have no clue what they're doing. Yeah. That's the truth of the matter. So you need to find someone who maybe will show you so that you can do the job yourself. You can replace the battery yourself. If they can pay a guy a minimum wage to do it at Walmart, you can do it. Absolutely, for sure, because you're brighter than that. If you're listening to USA Prepares, if you are a student or an instructor of USA Prepares, you are way smarter than the average in the United States or worldwide. No question, because you want to know more.
Yeah. What I would like to go into briefly is, how I came to, I'll segue into a question that you asked the other day, but I want to say how I came to the idea of applying for stable hands work. And I said to myself, it was actually inspired by USA Prepares broadcast. And I had been applying for some stable hand work, but, I decided to take it a bit more seriously when I had to think about your comment, and also Dr. Shealy's comment as well, that people tend to do best at what they did in a past life, okay? Obviously, I don't want to do a lot of the types of work that I did in a past life, but there's aspects of the work that I was really, really good at. One of them being horsemanship. With being Lady Catherine Ferrers, I was very, very good with horses. And, that's something where I've been able to take a talent from that past life and turn it to a legal and lawful means of generating some income. And I would encourage people in the class to go with somebody who has a lot of experience with doing past life regression. So if you're in Dr. Shealy's area, definitely give him a call, and he will be able to do a past life regression with you. Or Dr. Richard Allen Miller, I believe that he also does past life regression therapy with people. But you just got to realize that, or, just ask God to show you who you were in a past life, because you will be able to realize what you did in that life. And like I say, maybe you won't be able to employ all aspects of what you did, but there will be some aspect that you will be able to implement. And something else, Vincent, that you asked was, how did I know that I was George Wilson? Would you like to know? Would the class? Do you think the class would like to know?
Absolutely. Because I was a nobody, according to what I learned in my past life regression with Dr. Shealy. I was just a farmer And I had the same success that I'm having with the broadcast, getting people to prepare. 0. And so it seems to me that if this is true, I'm due to repeat what I'm doing to try to get people to wake up, and I'm not very good at it. So, boy, I got a tough row to hoe. Jeez.
Yeah.
But, yeah. And, well, John Reagan said the same thing. He said he's gotten 0 people to pay attention. And how about you? Just very quickly before you get into how did you know? Have you have you gotten people to prepare?
I have got, I don't know. I hope so. I hope that people are paying attention.
Yeah.
I think that, I think that there are a few people out there who are listening, because occasionally I get emails from people who say, gee, I love your broadcast. You've got so many wonderful things to say. And I really appreciate that. It encourages me that I know that there's never going to be a huge number of people, but it's like one person over here, one person over there that I help. There are people that are being helped, but I will actually go quickly now into how I know that I was George Wilson. And my husband, Archie, shortly after we met, he said to me, do you feel like we've met before, that we've known each other before? And I said, oh, I don't know, maybe. And I was thinking in this life, because I didn't even really believe in reincarnation at that time. And he said, oh, you don't understand. And he sort of dropped the topic. And then a few days later, we were all sort of sitting around, because he had a large family that lived with him. He had 5 children. He had an adult son living with him. He had an adopted son who was an adult son living with him. And he had his estranged wife with him as well, because she was schizophrenic and he didn't have the heart to throw her out on the street, because he was a very good, kind-hearted man, and he knew that terrible things would happen to her. But anyway, he was sitting around and he said, you must understand, I am the teetotaling pirate king. And everybody, I think the people who were sort of there had heard that before, and they sort of rolled their eyes and they said, oh, yeah, whatever, Dad. But I looked at him and I said, you're the teetotaling pirate king, what does that mean? And he said, I was on this earth before, hundreds of years ago, and I was a fellow called the teetotaling pirate king. Okay? And I said, what do you mean teetotaling pirate king? And he says, I was the pirate king, but I didn't drink alcohol. I only drank tea. And I said, really? And I believe there even could be such a thing. And he said, it's true. I am the teetotaling pirate king. And I said, okay, all right. And anyway, he used to tell stories about the things he'd done in that life, and also in other lives as well that he'd lived on the earth before. And so I agreed after a while to do past life regression, because he said, you were there. You were there. I believe you were there with me. And so I said, all right, we'll do past life regression, and we'll see how I fit in. And so we did past life regression, and we saw that I was a surgeon who lived in the teetotaling pirate king's cabin with him, and that we were very much in love, that I had to disguise myself as a man, because for some reason it wasn't safe for me to be a woman in that world. So, but I was so convincing in my act of being a man that nobody ever guessed that I was actually female. And when we began to, be obviously in love, and, I moved into his cabin and all the rest of it, all the people around us thought that we were homosexual, because I was so convincing with my act. And that was what happened. And as a result, nobody ever guessed. that was what we got in the past life regression research, that I was actually female, and it wasn't safe for me to be recognized as a female. And anyway, Archie was always saying, oh, you'll have to research the history of this. We didn't see our names at that time. That all we knew was that I was the surgeon and that Archie was the teetotaling pirate king. And so what happened, well, I'll continue the story after the break, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Guineith is with us. Guineith Isaacs. You can find her on the internet. As a matter of fact, you can type in George Wilson, pirate, and Guineith Isaacs comes up. We'll be right back. Class, what Guineith has been saying indirectly, many, many different ways, and I totally agree with her. If you want to be happy in life, turn your hobby into your business. She loves horses. She loves farming. She's turning that into another business. She's expanding her business with her hobby, with her loves of life. That's what she's doing. You can do it too. Guineith?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that, or what you're saying. That's what I'm saying, because ultimately, that thing that you love, that's in your heart, is probably the thing you're going to be most successful at. Okay, but yeah, it's. I would like to just finish off by saying exactly how it came about that I realized that I actually was George Wilson, because I think that's important to put a bookend on that story. Archie died suddenly in 2003. He had atherosclerosis and didn't know it. A piece of cholesterol broke off on the inside of his heart and blocked up one of the coronary vessels, and he had a heart attack and died while he was right next to me. And but he knew that he wasn't long for this world, and he said, make sure that they don't bury me on the land. Make sure that they bury me at sea. And that was the type of burial that I arranged for him through the funeral home. And it was twice as expensive as a regular funeral, but he had life insurance, and so the life insurance paid for it. But then, I grieved for him because we had a great marriage and I was very much in love and all the rest of it. But what happened was, after about 3 months, I said, right, this thing would not leave me alone about him saying that he is the teetotaling pirate king, and I thought it was stupid. So I went and did a Google search for teetotaling pirate king, and I found out about Bartholomew Roberts, Captain Bartholomew Roberts, and that's his nickname. You can go into Google and search teetotaling pirate king Roberts or Bartholomew Roberts, and you'll see that's what his name is. That's what history records him as being. And if you read his history, you'll find out that he had an intimate friend, and this intimate friend, Roberts declared that it was his messmate or his mate lot, which meant that he shared his bowl and he shared his cabin, he shared his bed, he shared everything he had with this fellow, and this fellow was a surgeon, and his name was called George Wilson. And they were completely smitten with each other. They were in love with each other. And I don't really agree with homosexuality, okay? I think that it's a stupid waste of a life. But I have been on the homosexual website and seen what they have to say about it, and they agree. You know, when they get to talking about pirates and homosexuality, they use George Wilson and Bartholomew Roberts as an example, but they don't know to this day that I was actually female, which lines up precisely with what we saw in our past life regression work. I was very, very convincing at pretending to be an effeminate man. But I wasn't, and the reason why it wasn't safe for me to come out was because of Article 6 of Bartholomew Roberts' Pirates Code. And if you go onto the internet and type in Article 6, Roberts' Pirates Code, you can read what that says. It says that no woman shall be allowed on the ship, especially not a woman disguised as a man, and the penalty for that is death. And Roberts was, he was the one who made that rule, but once he made it and once it was voted in, he was as subject to that rule as any of his crew were. And so, you know, when he made that rule, he had no idea that I was actually female. And had he known, he probably wouldn't have done that. But there's a few things that I remember that are different to what the history books record. And I remember meeting Robert in that life, basically when he was first kidnapped and forced to become a pirate by the previous pirate captain, which was Hal Davis. And maybe I'll go into what I've seen that describes the discrepancy. Actually, I'll go into it briefly now.
Well, we can't. We're out of time, Guineith. We only have a few seconds left.
I'll have to describe that another day.
Yeah, we'll do it another day. And I'm sorry for those of you who have called in. Need to call in sooner so we can take your call. So I apologize, but we'll take your calls if you call in sooner rather than the last couple minutes of the broadcast. Thank you, Guineith.